And so as we gather here today, we are conscious this is a global effort. And so to accommodate our members across different time zones, just be aware we are hosting 2 identical sessions today. So whether you're joining us in the morning slot or the afternoon session, our goal really does remain the same, which is to ensure that financial mechanisms are effectively driving the industrial transition. Our focus today is on boosting international climate cooperation and partnerships to improve the enabling environment for industry decarbonization, especially in emerging markets and developing economies through public finance and technical assistance. So ultimately, really what we're trying to do here is to mobilize private capital for green industrialization so that we can achieve our goals towards a clean industry transition to meet the goals and objectives of the Paris Agreement. The toolkit, as I think many of you know, is not a static document. It is an evolving effort that's designed to keep pace with the market. And so with that in mind, I really do want to acknowledge the very unique mix of expertise and experience that we have in this virtual room. We've brought together voices from industry associations, international financial institutions, private finance, philanthropies, and civil society. And that is, of course, intentional diversity. We know that closing the financing gap for decarbonization can't be done by one sector alone. It can't be done by governments. It can't be done by international organizations. It can't be done by finance. It requires the convergence of policy, private capital, and industrial strategy in order to be successful. And so we're not just here to listen. I encourage all of you. We are here to strategize because the core of our discussion today is on application. How diverse stakeholders like you can use this toolkit to accelerate real-world decarbonization efforts. We want this to be an engaging and an open discussion. Your insights really are what are going to make this toolkit effective. And so I encourage all of you, please be an active participant today. So I'm so excited for us to get started. And with that, I will turn over, I believe, to Francisco. For your opening thoughts. Thank you so much to you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, Michael, and good morning, everyone. My name is Francisco Ulloa. I'm the alternate representative of Chile to the Climate Club. As you know, we're about 47 members and 2 co-chairs. So one is Germany and the other co-chair is Chile. As members of the Climate Club, we're united in accelerating industrial decarbonization to reach our shared climate objectives by building competitive low-carbon industry. What does ambition mean in practice? It means to build credible trajectories to cut emissions in hard-to-abate sectors, to implement tangible policies, and align financial flows with the Paris Agreement, and thereby also strengthening economic resilience. In addition to the mapping report, which was presented on October the 2nd. This updated financial toolkit aims to enrich the tools to help create a common understanding of best practices on how to improve the financing conditions of the transition. As you may know, achieving a net zero pathway by around mid-century requires a significant scale-up in global investments for industrial decarbonization by a factor of 3 to 5 from current levels by 2030. This challenge is especially acute for emerging markets and developing economies, where a majority of new investments in industrial infrastructure is set to take place, while access to technical expertise and financial support for decarbonized industry remains limited. To help address this gap, the OECD developed a financial toolkit for the Climate Club, which proposes 28 economic, de-risk, and financing instruments that can support investment in industry decarbonization. This toolkit is designed to assist countries as well as providers of financial and technical assistance in accelerating their decarbonization efforts. Our collective ambition is not just about setting targets, it's about advancing on implementation by creating enabling conditions for investment and innovation. Today's discussion is an opportunity to identify practical steps to scale up finance and ensure that no country is left behind in the transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Francisco, and to you, Michael, for your excellent scene-setting remarks. So I'll just quickly go over some housekeeping rules. So we kindly ask participants, as mentioned in the chat, to rename themselves by putting their name and country organizations first, and then their first and last name. The session, as you may know, is being recorded for internal note-taking purposes and will also be shared with members on the One Community platform after this meeting. Please feel free to use the chat for questions or comments during the presentation. We'll address them during the discussion segment. And with that, I'll hand the floor over to Joseph Cotonnier from the OECD's Environment Directive. So over to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Michael. And we can move to the next slide. So as presented by Michael in its opening remark, this financial toolkit has been developed under the third pillar of the Climate Club on boosting international climate cooperation and partnerships. And importantly, the first version of the toolkit, to which many of you have contributed, was published at the beginning of the year, so in March. And you have the link here in the presentation. As it is a living document, we are currently updating the toolkit based on additional insights from case studies, new case studies that are being collected, as well as some fine-tuning based on the initial review and workshop that we had in April with Climate Club stakeholders. In addition, there's also a change in format, as the previous version was a short PowerPoint, and now we are converting that into a more formal and more classic OECD report. So moving to the next slides, my colleague Amelia will present very briefly an overview of what's in the toolkit.
Thank you, Joseph. So the toolkit highlights several economic de-risking and financial instruments. So far, we have a total of 32 financial instruments that aim to advance low carbon solutions and are deployed via projects to promote technologies and or specific decarbonization efforts within farms and plants. And these are classified under 3 categories. The first being economic, the second being de-risking and risk mitigation, and the third being financing instruments. Economic instruments can be deployed by governments and could look like policies such as tax credits. De-risking / risk mitigation instruments can be deployed by commercial banks, governments, IFIs, development banks, etc., and aim to de-risk a project and or technology to improve the bankability of a project and investment. And lastly, financing instruments are very similar in the sense that they can be deployed by a variety of financial and government actors and aim to promote private investment towards specific projects or technologies. To complement each of these 32 financial instruments, we have listed 31 case studies and the success factors and they highlight the success factors of instruments to support industry decarbonization projects. Each case study is diverse in the region it represents, the instruments, as well as its providers. And then lastly, to support the instruments and the case studies, we have also outlined economic assessments of several technologies for 3 key sectors. These are the steel sector, the cement sector, and the petrochemical sector. Next slide, please. So there were 4 key themes that we found from the case studies, and you can call these lessons. And essentially, the first lesson is that there needs to be an increase in access to finance for industry decarbonization. The second being the improvement of the bankability of projects and investments. The third being the need to increase mobilization of private capital. And last being the scaling and replicability of projects. So across these 4 lessons, we see that these can overlap across the case studies, but in addition, each of the key messages below the 4 themes are highlighted or directly linked in the report to the case studies themselves, as well as the instruments. For example, in the 4th theme under access to finance, we directly link the use of local currency financing instruments and foreign exchange risks, and how they should be, how they can be deployed successfully, such as shielding lenders and borrowers from currency mismatches and making debt service more predictable. So essentially what we try to derive from these lessons is that all the instruments can be used together, but have different purposes, and understanding how to best use them and apply them is what we try to relay within these messages. Next slide, please. Back to you, Joseph.
Yeah, so in addition to these key messages illustrated with case studies, the last part of the toolkit update includes economic assessment of 3 sectors, as presented by Amelia. Quite importantly, these economic assessments are illustrative and based on OECD work at country level. That means here we have the example for the cement sector that we have analyzed a number of technologies. In that case here, the use of carbon capture and storage. But of course, there are a wide array of other options that can help decarbonize the cement industry. What we are showing in this economic assessment is first something that is not directly here in the slide, but what is the cost difference between the cost of production, or LCOP, of the low carbon technologies, which is here on the left side of the slide, compared to a baseline, which is the fossil fuel-based incumbent technologies. And based on this gap, we then analyze how several of the instruments that are described in the toolkit can be implemented in order to bridge this economic gap and increase the competitiveness of the transition or the near zero emissions technologies. So all this is, of course, illustrative. It depends on each technology, each country context, sometimes also market conditions. But the purpose is really to see how to package these instruments and how to combine them in practice. Not going in all the technical details here, but what is important is that you can see that a combination here of CAPEX subsidy, concessional finance to reduce the WACC, which can include the use of guarantees as well, support for infrastructure here through the CO2 transport and storage, as well as the use of green premium in order to have purchaser of industrial green goods pay an additional price for low carbon emissions, all contributes to reaching a final price that is coherent or competitive with the baseline technologies that we here assess under various carbon pricing scenarios. And you have, of course, more details in the full report. Moving to the next slide and starting to initiate as well the roundtable discussion. One question is, which we just described with Amelia, what is in the toolkit? So this is the analytical base. Another question is, how do we disseminate the findings of the toolkit? How can various stakeholders, including policymakers, industry actors, financing institutions, and more broadly, civil society organizations, can make use of this compendium of examples and analysis in order to inform their initiatives? And this is quite important, as we have seen this year in Belém and through many other forums, that there is a growing commitment from both the public sector and the private sector to transition the industry. And this is reflected in a number of pledges and statements listed in these slides that have been also agreed at COP30, at G20, but also through individual initiatives or country level initiatives. So we have a number of country platforms currently, also including the industry sector. And we have seen that in a few JETPs, but also in the CIF new industry decarbonization program, working with 7 countries to develop investment plans. We have seen that in TBIP, supported by notably EBRD in Turkey, in order to have a specific country platform for industry decarbonization. The GCF has also announced 30 new country platforms. So this is a topic that is really emerging and that requires this data, evidence, best practice sharing in order to accelerate implementation. And we hope, of course, the toolkit contributes to that. Moving to the next slide on the next steps for the toolkit. So first, we are finalizing this week, including with the key insights from today's workshop, the updated version of the toolkit. We will send it for review at the end of the week. And as it, of course, overlaps with the holiday period, we will give a bit more time than usual to review it until the 11th of January. And following that, we will follow the usual OECD publication process to have the toolkit available by end of March. I'll stop there for this presentation. Maybe pause before starting the roundtable in case there are specific questions related to the review process or the content of the toolkit, and then we'll discuss more specifically how to make use of it. I don't see any hand raised, so we can move to the next slide and open the roundtable discussion. As we aim for the exchanges to be lively and free-flowing, please just feel free to raise your hands during the next 30 minutes, and we will give you the floor. Very grateful as well if you can keep your initial interventions to around 3 minutes to give a chance to everybody to talk. But of course, if we have some spare time, everybody will have a chance to speak a second or third time. What we'd like to discuss today, as you can see on the screen for the guiding questions, is not specifically on the content itself of the financial toolkit, as we have been discussing that in April, and you have the chance to review the report, but really how to make use of it, how to leverage it, how the toolkit can inform your own activities, can inform your customers, your partners, your stakeholders, and as well, if you have any recommendations on what would be the best ways to disseminate the finding of the toolkits, being in specific events, being in informing specific initiatives, specific platforms. So very happy to hear your thoughts on all these dissemination options and relevance of the toolkit for your organizations. So I will stop here. Please all feel free to raise your hands to kickstart the discussion. Okay, I don't see any hand raised in the directly in Zoom, so I may just call Ronan, Hodge, and Isabel. I see that you have now raised your hand, so Ronan first, and then Isabel. Thank you.
I know. Hope you can hear me okay. I'll break the ice then. I mean, first to say, I'll try and be brief because you've got a lot of people to cover. But you know, I think the toolkit is really useful, really valuable and timely contribution. And this area of industrial decarbonisation, as you know, and as you set out in the paper as well, that is a really important part, particularly for emerging market and developing economies as they transition. I think two things that I would sort of point to are, we are closely involved through some sort of representing Mary Shapiro on this, and her hats straddle not just GFANZ but also the Global Capacity Building Coalition, which is aims to kind of help disseminate this sort of material, particularly in emerging market developing economies who are considering how to get finance aligned with their goals here, but also the Industrial Transition Accelerator. And so I think in the next year, as the focus of that initiative leans more into how to get projects into final investment decision space, I think this toolkit is already being noted as something that folks have been using. I would just say, I think the need for case studies, examples, those sorts of aspects is something that we've heard really strongly from the financial institutions that are involved in GFANs. That's something they find extremely valuable. It's something we want to do more of, and I think linking this into those members, but also linking the toolkit into the work of the Global Capacity Building Coalition that is increasingly acting as a sort of repository for this sort of information will be extremely valuable. The only other thing I was going to mention was we've been quite closely involved in the as a sort of finance partner to some of the country platforms like the JETPs, the BIP in Brazil in recent years. They've been quite challenging, but there's been a lot of lessons learned, and now the model is clearly getting traction. We've seen, as you mentioned, at COP30, about 14 other country platforms established. And I think it's things like this toolkit that are going to be a really useful way of skilling up essentially those country platforms to think about how they have the right kind of things in place, the straddle policy, industrial strategy, finance, etc., to make those country platforms successful. Because it's much harder for groups of financial institutions to get involved in such a range of different country platforms. So I think this toolkit is going to be really valuable to those, and I would encourage, I suppose, folks to work with those new country platforms, particularly through groups like GCF, who are closely involved in supporting them. So those were the main things I thought useful in relation to your questions. But thank you very much again for the work.
Thanks a lot, Ronan, and indeed the current traction country platforms is something that we aim to inform, also engaging with the secretariat of various platforms at country level. And this is also particularly important as many of the examples we have in the toolkit are also related to emerging markets and developing economies that are also one of the key focus for both the OECD industry financing team and the Climate Club team. Moving now to Isabel from EBRD.
Thank you very much for the invitation and congratulations for the work done. I was going to make a couple of suggestions on how this work can be disseminated, and the country platforms were one of them, so that has been said already. I was thinking about the local and regional authorities as well. In some cases, they have a financial muscle to be able to issue bonds or to provide some financing for companies or municipal actors. So reaching out to them would be important, I think. All the examples that I saw in this piece of work, they label government, lateral financial institutions, and so on, but I think they have an important role to play. So this is one type of actor that I with this. Industry associations, you mentioned EBRD has some in different countries, so we will use those to disseminate this work. Organizations and associations of banks is another dissemination tool, in my view, at the country level or international level. There are a number of instruments here that they can issue bonds, green bonds, for example, or they can finance clients come with projects, some of the tools that are presented here. So again, the associations of financial institutions are another type of care. Finally, the importance of keeping examples up to date and giving more examples, maybe with more data. If I am an institution, I would want to see a lot of details, for example, in how the sustainability-linked bonds are done in practice. Maybe we don't need to put the information here, but then we need to have a link to be able to refer where these people can see. I hope this is useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Indeed, so we are engaging with associations quite a lot as well in OECD work at country level, but of course regional or or global associations are also part of Climate Club stakeholders and providing very useful insights actually to the toolkit and the economic assessments that are being done. An important point also that you mentioned, and I take note of this as well, in the current version of the toolkit, we now have a bit more than 30 case studies. A few of them have been developed in 2023-24. So in previous version of reports, more or less half of them have been developed this year. So providing very new updated insights. And this is, of course, potential follow-up work as well to see how for a specific instrument there can be either more case studies for one specific instrument or some benchmarking of how the same instruments has been developed in various contexts. So to complement the current illustrative aspect of the case studies, but some analytical, concrete ways of looking at how this has been designed. So yeah, I took note of that as an interest from your perspective. Now handing over to Dennis from GIZ.
Thank you very much, Joseph. Also, thank you for inviting us. We're very happy to participate and also happy to see where the financial toolkit currently is at. From GIZ side, as you know, we're really more involved on the implementation of projects, but at the same time, we work very closely with partner countries on the national level. What I would like to, I think, also really point out where it can be important is, so you mentioned today as well that, you know, you have an array of really different instruments, right? And I think we can really figure out how to support partner countries, how to use these different instruments together in identifying financing opportunities, both public and private, for industry decarbonization. I'm thinking specifically also really making sure that the topic of financing industrial transformations also are embedded in more overarching policy frameworks. So you've also already mentioned the country platforms. At the same time, we know, of course, this is a rather fresh development, so not really all of the countries already have such an existing platform, but there are, of course, countries still, you know, trying to figure out how to finance their NDCs or how to finance just transition. And I think it would be essential to really make sure that this is also embedded there. So that is one point for me in terms of overarching frameworks in the countries. The second one, I think you've also already mentioned, Joseph. I remember in one of, I think, the previous calls or meetings as such that was also held, and I remember a voice from the industry basically saying, you know, we really need more experience when it comes to the implementation. So I think also in terms of the case studies, right? Really focusing on the experience, what worked and what didn't work. So I think the aim should not only be how can we generate more bankable projects, but also how can we ensure that these bankable projects really are also geared for implementation on the ground. I think these all need to play together to ensure that, you know, we also generate some successful projects and experiences that other countries can draw from. And of course, we at GIZ, we're happy to also include this in our planning, but generally also, of course, in the knowledge management activities that we take on both on national and regional platforms. I think that's it for me for now.
Thank you very much, Denise. And yeah, indeed, we value a lot the collaboration, notably with GIZ, to also have more country insights, country offices, local presence as well, to make the findings of the toolkit very tangible for concrete cases. I don't see a specific hands raised, but there are a few other financial institutions in the room, I believe. I see, for instance, the World Bank. I don't know, Sarah, if you want to add to what colleagues from EBRD, GIZ, and GFANS have been saying.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Maybe Jen is better placed than me, but I agree with what colleagues said until now. And personally, I think I would reinforce the point on case studies. I think they are extremely useful to understand what went well and what didn't. And we are doing a little bit of work ourselves to understand our successful projects and those that didn't and in the way we wished, or yeah, I think it's you know, we want to learn our own lessons and then share, you know, the learning with others. So this is the involvement, you know, with the toolkit is we find it very useful. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. So I think we had now the feedbacks from financial institutions. Looking as well, there are a few other actors. Maybe if someone from the global matchmaking platform is here, yeah, Sarah Budget, feel free to take the floor to see as well how the Climate Club global matchmaking platform can make use of the toolkit.
Thanks, Joseph. Firstly, thanks for, the presentation. I think, again, fantastic to see the progress from early on in the year to where we have achieved now. Just kind of quick reflections on a couple of things, and I think what colleagues from EBRD, GIZ, and also, Sarah just referred to from the bank. From the global matchmaking platform, we are kind of regularly engaging with emerging and developing countries, as Joseph touched upon, that, the idea is to kind of start socializing the possibilities of what works and what doesn't work in terms of the different kinds of industry decarbonization related projects. And I think the examples in particular have proven to be quite valuable with regards to the different kinds of sectors and different kinds of projects, while different countries have been considering their different proposals through the matchmaking platform. What we would want to, also encourage countries to do is essentially, as they are putting together their requests for support for different kinds of projects or programs on industry decarbonization, I think the toolkit for us stands as a bit of a, benchmark for countries to consider before they put together their specific project proposals. So on a case-by-case basis, when and this I think touches upon what Dennis was mentioning, is when countries are looking at specific individual projects. That's one thing, but for many countries, they're still in the broader policy and regulatory establishment stage as well. And I think this is where, and I think the toolkit could additionally provide insights and support. And I think this is where we would look forward to kind of working very closely with the OECD to offer the insights from the toolkit to countries who are requesting for technical and financial assistance through the global matchmaking platform. We have had one round of webinars jointly with the OECD to the emerging and developing countries who are seeking support through the global matchmaking platform. But I think we'll, like in the new year, more actively also pursue that so that countries are aware that this toolkit is now ready, available for them, and it's kind of should be the benchmark for them to kind of start the thinking process. So thanks once again, OECD colleagues, for carrying on with this work.
Thank you very much, Sarah Budget. Looking at the list of participants, maybe before moving to Climate Club member countries, if they want to make an intervention. I see Nadia from the World Economic Forum that you're online. We've been working quite a lot together also as the WEF has some members from the industry sector, a number of initiatives that provide also good evidence. For instance, the First Movers Coalition on what's the intentions, what's the ambitions from the industry actors to move towards decarbonization. So maybe Nadia, if you have a few insights of the work that is ongoing at WEF and potential synergies with the toolkit, or how the toolkit could also be useful for the members, that would be very useful.
Yes, thank you very much, and happy to give a couple of comments. So first of all, congratulations on the work. This is fantastic. Not just the kind of the list of tools, of course, but also the very detailed, super insightful case studies. We have, as you I think mentioned in the chat, done a lot of work on developing playbooks of financing solutions, both in the energy space, but also more broadly on industry, on agriculture, on nature, and we see a lot of interest from partners, both with corporates in different industry sectors, but also with financial institutions in such best practice case studies to inform how they go about their work. So definitely a lot of interest. I think one thing that is top of mind for us, and I should say I come from the World Economic Forum Center for Financial and Monetary Systems. So we work with a community of around 300 financiers across banks, insurers, asset managers to develop solutions to finance both heavy industry decarbonization, but also, as I said, more broadly on nature, agriculture, and increasingly also on energy. And one kind of tension point that we often hear is the tension between the need for bespoke approaches and the need for standardization. And of course, the toolkit is a bit of a step in that direction. But what we often hear is kind of the kind of elephant in the room question being how deployment, how standardization and deployment at scale can then happen. So how it can be really reach a scale where these tools can be used at scale. So yeah, we see definitely a lot of interest. And as you mentioned, for example, also the First Movers Coalition. So this is also something that, as part of the finance pillar of the First Movers Coalition, we definitely bring in and further develop. So yeah, absolutely, very, very relevant.
Thank you very much, Nadia. And of course, yeah, very useful for us as well to build on both the industry and finance pillars and stakeholders of WEF. And as you mentioned, I think the illustrative example also show how for various technologies, bespoke interventions, but packaging of instruments, tailoring instruments to specific cases is extremely relevant in order to actually bridge the gap and ensure the competitiveness of those low carbon technologies. I hand over now to Catherine Goldberg from Johns Hopkins University.
Hi there, thanks so much. I'm Catherine. I work at the Net Zero Industrial Policy Lab at Johns Hopkins University. So new to the Climate Club world, but this is really relevant for what we do. And thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to offer a bit of a connection of how this work feeds into what we do, and then a recommendation for the toolkit's usefulness. So we, as a university center, advise countries and policymakers on how to increase their competitiveness in global clean energy supply chains. So we do that with our data and analysis, and we have like an online platform that helps provide that data. But then we also develop tailored policy recommendations for each country that we work with that's underpinned by our data and analytics from Johns Hopkins University. So, you know, we now are in this phase of using our data to not only help countries be competitive, but also to help them implement and reach their NDCs. And so I think being able to take along this toolkit would be really useful as we go to each country we work with, tailor our policy recommendations to them, and then say, okay, and here's a great example of potential financial instruments you could look at and organizations you could partner with to actually make the clean energy technologies more implementable and in your country. And you know, right now what we're seeing is that a lot of countries are in the process of developing these national industrial policy strategies. So I think the timing is really great for this toolkit to come out and this work to be happening. Which brings me to a potential recommendation for the toolkit, just to make it a little more user-friendly. I think, you know, a lot of questions that we get from countries are around what kinds of instruments are most useful for them. And having some kind of decision tree at the start of this toolkit would be really useful to help narrow down which financial instrument is the one that makes the most sense for each country. You could maybe simplify some of the benefits and the relevance for decarbonization, those sections that are outlined for each financial instrument, and kind of put those into some kind of decision tree, just to help countries and think through as they're deciding what policies to implement to decarbonize their industries. What are the financial instruments that could be potentially coupled with that type of decarbonization policy? And I think, even though of course that would need to be tailored, you know, countries need to think through exactly what instruments align with their policies, but at least some kind of decision tree would help narrow down and give some starting options. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Catherine. Very interesting to hear as well the complementarity of the financing solutions present in the toolkit with, in particular, policies and regulations support, which are also the two pillars we have. And at the OECD and at the Climate Club, there's, in addition to this financial toolkit, also a toolbox on policies for industry decarbonization. So we also aim to have these two legs working together and progressing together. And thanks a lot for the suggestion to have a decision tree. We'll see if that's something we can incorporate in this version of the toolkit, or something that could be also tailored for various country requests or various sector technologies and specific cases, in order to see as well in practice how this could work, and then include that in subsequent versions of the toolkits. I think, yeah, but that's a great suggestion. I don't see any other hands raised, so maybe we give the chance if there's any Climate Club member countries who'd like to intervene. Yeah, if not, I think we can briefly move to concluding remarks, and most likely we'll end a few minutes earlier than planned. So first of all, wanted to thank you all for joining the discussions, for sharing your views. That's extremely useful, as with this second version of the toolkit, again, there is, of course, one aspect which was to improve the content, update the content, but more importantly, we're looking at increasing the impact and leveraging these analytical tools that we are developing for the Climate Club. The feedback are really useful. I noted that many of you highlighted the role of work at country level, deployment at country level, using the toolkits in support of specific requests tied with the policy ambitions at national level, including to support the implementation of NDCs. Another aspect that I noted is also on using the toolkit in selecting instruments and seeing how the current efforts can be scaled up and replicated, which is also great. And this is one of the key aspects of what we have in the key findings from case studies. And I noted very important as well aspects on what can be done with the toolkit. So first, as potential additions, to have decision trees on how to select instruments. And second, another option or a second proposal that is also to see how specific instruments can be benchmarked across their utilization to deep dive into how they are actually being implemented across a variety of case studies. So moving from illustration to actual analysis and benchmarking of implementation of several instruments. With that, I will close the meeting and just hand over to the Climate Club Secretariat and Michael Alonsi in order to provide a few logistic details.
Thank you so much, Joseph, and thank you to all of those that participated and joined in this roundtable. As a reminder, a summary will be posted on the Climate Club members platform, the One Community, and this updated toolkit, as mentioned by Joseph earlier, will be looking to publish it in early 2026. And therefore, the Climate Club will be in touch in the new year with any further details on this. And without further ado, we hope that you have a great rest of your day and end of year. So goodbye, good evening, and good morning for everyone else. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.